So at this point, you might be asking yourself a really good question. Why do I even need cameras? When we're in the perspective viewport, we could hold the Alt and middle mouse button, as we've talked about, to rotate around. We could zoom in, zoom out. We could do all sorts of stuff, pan around. Why do we need to bring a camera into this? And that's a very good question. Let me tell you why you'd want to use a camera. Number one, you can't animate the perspective view. You can't zoom in and animate that. You can't pan around or rotate around something and animate that. And let's say, for example, you had a character that was making their big Oscar speech. You're going to want to be able to zoom into their face to really milk that emotional experience for all it's worth. You can't do that by using the perspective viewport. Also, when we use cameras, we have access to the size of the lens. For example, do we want a telephoto shot or a wide-angle shot? We'll talk about what those mean a little bit later, but again, that's not something you can do in the perspective viewport. And finally, there's a lot of cool tricks with cameras that we can do, like depth of field, which will create blur at certain distances of your camera viewing to make a certain object be the focus. Those are all pretty cool tricks, and you can't do them in the perspective view. Now, if you're just rendering out a still image and you don't want to affect the lens angle at all, well then, maybe the perspective viewport will work for you. Now, in the next segment, we're going to be talking about making cameras from scratch and moving them around. But in this segment, I'm going to show you a really cool shortcut, which is actually the way that I usually make cameras. I find it much easier. Let's go ahead and select a teapot over here in the Create tab. Make a few of those. Let's get a cool camera angle that we like. Or that I like, since I'm the one doing the video recording here. So, I like that one. Why not? Now, if we were to go now and try to create a camera, and we were going to try to match this, it could be a little tougher than what we just did. Just like with lights, some cameras have targets, and sometimes lining them up just right isn't quite as easy as using arc rotate in the perspective view. So, once we have the perspective viewport where we want it, so then what I can do is go to the Views menu and select Create Camera from View. However, I more often than not use this keyboard shortcut Control-C for Create Camera, if you like. I'm going to select that. Now, in our viewport, it seems that nothing has changed. But as you look in these other viewports, you'll notice that a camera has already been created for us. Notice also that our viewport is now called Camera 01 and not Perspective anymore. When you make a camera by default, Max usually switches out your perspective viewport with the new camera view that you've created. However, if I hit the letter P on the keyboard, I jump back to perspective view and I arc rotate around without any penalty, because as soon as I want to jump back to the camera view, I just hit the letter C to see what the camera is saying. And I haven't adjusted or fiddled with the camera in any way. So now let's move along and talk about the different types of cameras that are available to us.